Hello and welcome back to the Collin Cadmus Podcast. Today I'm joined by Sam Jacobs. Sam graduated from the University of Virginia in 1999 and spent the first couple years of his career as a consulting analyst and finance associate before starting his own music label. He then served as the managing director for Gerson Lehrman Group prior to getting into tech sales leadership at Axial, Livestream, the Muse, and Behavox, until starting his most recent and current venture, where he serves today as the founder and CEO of Pavilion, the world's #1 private community for go-to-market leaders. I've known Sam since the early days of Pavilion, when it was formerly known as the Revenue Collective, and he's helped to guide me and mentor me through critical phases of my career. But the last time we spoke was 4 years ago when we hosted Stock Option Straight Talk, a video you can find on my YouTube channel where we covered everything your employer doesn't want you to know about your stock options. Needless to say, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Sam, and I'm excited to catch up and get his thoughts on all that's changing in B2B sales and find out what he thinks is working and what isn't in 2025 and beyond. Before we get started, if you're watching on YouTube, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave us a comment if you have questions or feedback. If you're joining us from Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please drop us a review and let us know what you think of the episode. This is much appreciated as it really helps to grow the audience. Without further ado, let's dive in and get his thoughts. Sam, thanks for joining me and welcome to the show.
Collin, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. It's been a long time since we caught up. I'm curious to get your thoughts on these topics. And look, these are, I call them debates. It's sort of just hot topics for me that have been, I guess, bouncing around on LinkedIn and all that stuff. So when I decided to bring the podcast back, I said, I want to just sort of lay out these questions and get a lot of people's thoughts on them so I can see where we're headed, where's the tide shifting, so to speak. But I've sort of changed the way that I've asked the first question because I think I was a bit presumptive in the way I was asking it. I was asking like, what's broken with B2B outbound and how did we get here? Then I realized maybe not everyone agrees, right? Some people maybe don't like that phrase. So I've changed the way I've asked it and we'll kind of spark the topic, and wherever you want to go with it is fine. But I've been saying, is traditional outbound sales broken, dead, or dying? If yes, how so? And just so you know, in the next question, we'll go into what's working today. But let's start there. I mean, there's all these debates about like cold calling's dead or outbound's dead or all this or that, the decline of all the connect rates, these different things. What do you think's going on there?
I think, as my friend Asad would say, the rate of new company formation, I think there's like 7% per quarter. And with AI, I think it's easier than ever to start a company and build a company. And I think people's attention is at a premium because there's great supply of people that want that attention and a limited number of people in buying decisions and buying roles that at companies that could use some of this technology. And so, and I also think people have been inundated with messaging across all of the different ways that it's possible to connect with them. The thing that I would say, it's like, is it broken? Listen, was it easier to get in touch with somebody in 1950? Sure. Does that mean that it's broken? Implies that there's some magical formula that can fix connect rates, fix, as they say, GTM efficiency, which is also declining materially. GTM efficiency being how much do you have to spend in sales and marketing for every net new dollar of ARR, meaning including retention. And that ratio has been going in the wrong direction for a very long time. So certainly it's not working. If things are working less and less well, the question would be, is there an alternative? I tend to think that, I'm just going to talk my book, and what's my book? My book is that great products win. And I know that there's people in the Valley, lots of people that would say go-to-market excellence and execution is something that can take an average product and help it, win the category. My experience, maybe I've just worked at crappy companies, but my experience is that you have to start with a great product. If you have a great product, it's possible. I don't think outbound sales is broken at all. I don't see an alternative. The alternative could be inbound and creating all kinds of content, but really, I think all of this stuff works together. I think that all motions, all GTM motions are interconnected. I think that there's an attribution problem where, if your SDR is reaching out to somebody 50 times, and maybe they're sending really thoughtful emails, personalized emails, and they never get a connect. They never connect with somebody. But then that person, because they're they're aware of who you are, and maybe they're retargeted with an ad on LinkedIn, and they click on that ad and they come and they fill out a demo request form on the website. And that's technically inbound. And that's the attribution for that, depending on the attribution model. But if it's last touch attribution, it'll say paid is working, SDRs are not working. I think Gaurav Agarwal, the COO at ClickUp, I had him on my podcast recently, and he said all GTM is brand. All GTM investments are brand investments. Every touch point with the organization is a brand investment. And the point is, anytime you talk to an SDR, anytime the SDR leaves a voicemail, anytime you send an email, whatever the copy is on the website, all of it collectively works to get somebody's attention and turn it into interest, hopefully, so that the salesperson can speak with them. So all of that's like a long-winded way of saying, I think outbound sales is super hard. I think broken implies that it's capable of being fixed. I don't think it's capable of being fixed. I think people's attention is only going to get more and more fragmented. I think that means that it's really hard to execute in today's environment, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And I think that's, I think you have another question at some point, Collin, about quota attainment. And we have some data, not to jump around, but we have some data that we do with EBSTA that in 2023, 20% of all reps generated 80% of revenue. So the Pareto law, which makes sense, last year was 14%. So the concentration of great salespeople driving most of the results for most companies is only increasing. Does that mean that sales is broken? I don't know. I mean, I think sales is hard, and I think a lot of crappy people are in sales that don't do a very good job. So is that going to change? I think that's been the way it's been the whole time.
Wow. I think that was the most thorough and complete answer I've gotten yet. I've got more notes off one question there. And every point I'm just like, nailed it, nailed it, nailed it. And you brought something full circle in my head as you're going through all this. I'm like, this is actually why I've rewritten the question, because I'm starting to sort of see a lot of this stuff. But I mean, you hit so many home runs there. I mean, the go-to-market efficiency declining, there's more noise, there's so many companies, there's just more of everything. So that's something I've definitely realized and, spoken about over the years. But I mean, God, you just brought that all together. Having a great product to start with, like there's so much junk out there, right? If you're not selling something good, like if there's no demand for like what you're selling, it's hard to capture that demand as a salesperson, right? But the attribution thing was something I was just having a conversation with someone about yesterday. And it comes up often. So I'm working with some clients where I'm helping them through sort of setting up some brand partnerships and, getting into that whole realm. Because I think that's actually one area where it's sort of new and people can do it and it can actually help to accelerate all of this. But the big mistake I'm seeing is they're trying to measure attribution. And I'm like, don't even try. Like you are asking people to post content that hopefully goes viral. You're going to try to put maybe a CTA at the bottom, and maybe some low-hanging fruit's going to click that link and sign up for your product right there and then on the spot. But that is absolutely not the bulk of the value you're paying for. You're paying for impressions that accumulate over time, right? Yeah. I see the billboard here. I hear the podcast ad here. I see an influencer talking about here. And maybe eventually I take an action. And I think that even if we were to try to ask, an inbound lead today, how did you hear about us? And we try this all the time. They maybe remember the last thing. They maybe remember one place. They don't really know. The human brain does not know all the 50 or 100 touch points that eventually sort of led to making a decision. I think it's exactly the same with the outbound. And yeah, you're seeing this conversation a lot with marketers. Jay Tano talks about it a lot. Like just kind of use your gut a bit when it comes to this stuff. And I think you need to zoom out and at the end of the year, look at the total sum of investments you've made and see what the outcome is. And then apply some gut intuition to that, maybe some feedback from the team and see like, are we maybe wasting some money here? But like, if things are going well, maybe you don't want to pull off of an investment you made last year just because you couldn't track it, right? Maybe things are not going to go as well if you remove all those impressions and whatnot. And it's the same for cold calls, emails, brand partnerships, whatever. So 1,000% with you. And I want to chat about your book at the end too. I forgot to throw that in the notes. I just jotted that down. But do you have anything you want to add there in terms of like what's actually working today? Is there something new, besides the phone? I know I touched on the brand stuff a little bit, but anything you want to throw in there?
I mean, I think, listen, it sounds cheesy, but deep personalization around a great product that's omni-channel works. And so what does that mean? That means that ChatGPT and AI are creating huge amounts of content that it sounds generic. It's actually reasonably well written, but you can feel, they call it bot breath. Like you can feel that it's sort of this synthesis of average that, it feels like a mediocre marketing or copywriter's idea of what sounds cool. And my point is that if you can write thoughtfully, authentically, if you can say interesting things, I think that there's a market for that. Tactically, like what specific tools might work. I think, LinkedIn voice messages work, so like sending a message, but actually sending a voice note probably works. I think cold calling works maybe. I hate to say it doesn't work because I think you kind of need to be doing everything you possibly can. And I think, community works, being present in the communities where your buyers are hanging out. I think trade show attendance really works. So you just go to trade shows where your customers are and shake hands. I had a post that, the connect rate on a cold call is what, 1%, 2%. The connect rate on walking up to Collin at SaaStr and shaking his hand is 100%. Yeah. So I guess if I had to distill everything, which by the way, doesn't necessarily mean that CAC, customer acquisition cost, is going to go down. Mm-hmm. My point is getting on a plane and meeting people in real life is probably something that's differentiated and that works. And I understand that that's more expensive than, it might be more expensive than making 100 dials a day, but it works. And I think that's an area where I see people investing, sponsoring stuff, attending stuff in person, and just getting out into the world.
There's one theme that I noticed on every point that you listed there, because you talk about ChatGPT first, which is like, I just think it's too perfect for it to feel human, right? I think that's sort of what we're reading when we read it. And the second you can tell it's ChatGPT, you realize it's useless to read, because if you want that, you'll fetch it from ChatGPT yourself, right? But so what I'm hearing here, saying you say LinkedIn voice, cold calls can work, and I agree. It's like, does your ICP pick up the phone, basically, is like the big question there. If you can get them to answer, then it makes sense. But then community, trade shows, all this stuff is just human. That's like the theme, the voice notes, all of it is just we're almost backpedaling towards being more human than we were before ChatGPT. And because I think that's what is going to stand out today, right? That's what's going to resonate.
I agree. And again, you hear that, but that the number of companies is massively increasing. Mm-hmm. And that these companies need salespeople because people still aren't just going to buy from AI, but they're going to buy from human-empowered, AI-powered humans. Yeah. And so you take these margins, you're like, be authentic, be real, create great content, be hyper-personalized, be somebody that other people want to meet and interact with. Well, that's a small percentage of people. That's not necessarily a formula that changes the reality that 14% of reps are driving 80% of revenue, because the point is all that stuff is really hard. I think what it comes down to is that sales is hard and most salespeople suck. And that's because most people in general suck at their job. Yeah. And so I don't know that's, again, you can call it broken. It makes sense to me to call it broken. It feels like it, but broken implies fixable. Yeah. And that's my open question to the world. Is it fixable?
I love it. I'm with you. Let's move on to the next one. This one, I'm actually really, really eager to get your thoughts. I think you're probably more plugged into this than maybe anyone I've spoken with. But also, since I started asking this question, I think some things have been changing and there's some stuff picking back up. But I want to get your thoughts on growth at all costs. When I started asking this question, what I saw pretty clearly happening was like a big divergence in how companies were thinking about money and capital. And I think it's still happening, but it also feels like the trend of growth at all costs might be coming back for certain types of companies. What do you think's going on there? Is it disappearing? And what I mean is the notion of just endlessly raising capital, not focusing so much on profit, trying to get the valuation up and sort of look for that liquidity event that way. But I'm seeing a bunch of new founders entering the space that are doing things different. They're often sales founders, not technical. They're often just running remote plays. They're sort of doing everything themselves, looking to automate as much as possible. And they're looking to bootstrap. They're looking to, not be held accountable to T2, D3 or, whatever. And they want to do things their own way. Do you think that that's like that's the new way, or do you think there's sort of going to be these two options now, and there'll be these sort of drastically different ways of going to market, or anywhere else you want to go on that topic?
Well, I think there's a bifurcation. I think that what's happened is that people realize that they have. Well, first, there's a couple things that have happened. One of them is that people realize that they have more choices than just trying to raise money indefinitely. The second thing is that the funding environment has become extremely polarized. And if the AI VC gods anoint you as an AI native, AI first company, and you can show meaningful traction, you can raise endless amounts of money. And even T2, D3, meaning triple, twice, double, three times, oftentimes that's not even enough right now. And so I think if you are not credibly AI first, you're not showing that torrid growth rate, even if you're building a really solid business, you might not even have access to venture capital. You might still have access to other capital, but you might not have access to venture capital. And so there's a small number of companies that even have the option of pursuing growth at all costs. And even within those companies, it's hard for me to say that that's what they're doing, because presumably they have the data and the track record to back it up. Owner.com, Colin Norton's a CRO over there, and they just raised 120 million on a 900 pre. So they're, a unicorn worth over $1 billion. But according to what I've heard, they're growing 10% a month at 40 million in ARR. Now, if that's really true, I think that's Lemkin said 10% a month. He tends to be promotional. So maybe it's slightly less than that. Maybe some months they're growing 10%. But I know that Kyle runs a very, very disciplined sales organization. And I know that he's very good at SMB sales and designing the machine in the right way. So does that mean that they are pursuing inefficient growth, right? Which would be the sort of like implied in the growth at all costs characterization? I don't know that that's true. If you look at Fixer, I think it's a company that Colin,
Yep.
that I've advised, and Harry Stebbings invested, and apparently they're at 9 million in ARR. Last I checked a couple months ago, they were at 2 million. They're closing these super large enterprise deals, I think for like real estate and other large sales organizations. And my point is, they seem to deserve, and that's actually with a small number of people. And so I think that we're in a different environment. I still think that there's AI companies that are raising too much money, and I also do think that certain companies that are describing a certain amount of traction are misrepresenting the traction because they're tapping into experimental budget or POC budget and they're calling it ARR. A 3-month paid POC is not ARR. Selling a $30,000 pilot for 3 months and calling that 120K in ARR is not true. But that's okay. So where I come out on it is I think that I don't have an inside peek at a lot of like the companies that are raising a ton of money and maybe are not quite as developed as they think. But I do know that there's an opportunity for people to build different kinds of businesses these days. And I also think that if you're not growing extremely aggressively, you might not even have access to the capital markets in the first place. So I think, in some ways, I guess my point is I think that the work that Pavilion has done and Adam Robinson has done and other people that talk about bootstrapping and talk about profitable, efficient growth, I think it's worked in the sense that people are aware that they have choices and options. And I think if you can't raise, you might not even have the choice of not, being anything other than profitable.
Yeah.
But I think there's this reality setting in for founders and CEOs that it's okay to build a profitable business, and even if it's not going to be worth $1 billion, it might not work for venture, but it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You might be, I think you're the first person to say that maybe part of this is that they just can't raise capital. I hadn't thought about it that way because, of course, everyone will always present it like, we don't want to raise capital. We want to be a bootstrap company,
My experience is that 90% of the people that say we are choosing to bootstrap don't have any other choice.
It makes sense when you said it. I was like, yeah. I was like, that hadn't crossed my mind, but that actually makes a lot of sense. But they're doing the right thing. I mean, you never want to sound like you need money, right? So, I mean, the narrative also makes sense there. And great point on the ARR piece. I mean, I think I posted something similar the other day talking about just how inflated a lot of ARR numbers are. And I mean, I could probably list 20 different ways that companies do that, right? Like they're applying discounts to the first year, similar to what you described. And they know
Yeah.
in next year it's going to be the full ARR,
So they call it
allegedly.
renewing ARR,
I
and
mean,
yeah,
I've seen people just write those off as one-time coupons, and they don't even change the number in their accounting. They're just like, no, the ARR is the full amount. That was a one-time coupon that doesn't impact our ARR because it will renew at this full amount next year, even though we didn't get that money this year. And I'm like, but we're doing that to like 90% of the deals. So like,
just to be extremely clear, I mean, ARR is not a gap thing. You know, it's not generally accepted accounting principles. So it's hard to say that it's fraud,
hey, right,
but that
right.
is misrepresentation. And
Yes, yes.
it is 100% misrepresentation. And those people are liars.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen it more times than I can count, and if you bring it up, they're kind of like, "Oh no, no!" Like it's just sort of like this afterthought sort of thing. And then you've got also the stuff they'll play games with the churn numbers. They'll do prepaid annual deals, and then they'll go raise around. They're like, "Well, we haven't had a single churn." It's like we haven't had a single renewal come up yet, right? Like, there's been no opportunity
Well,
for that.
I teach exactly this stuff in CRO school. I teach one of the classes in Pavilion CRO school, and exactly what you're talking about, Colin. I have this whole section of no funny stuff.
Yeah,
And the point is, you can lie to Series A investors, but you can't lie to Series B or C investors because they start doing actual due diligence. And exactly to your point, they can do what they do, but at some point the bill will come due.
yeah, yeah. It's just a good thing for sales leaders to be aware of too when you're looking for jobs and coming in there. Like just ask these questions, figure out the real numbers because eventually you're going to, and something's going to be confusing, right? You're going
Yeah.
to maybe take a little while to figure it out. But let's chat a bit about VP sales average tenure. And I've seen some data on this that it's slightly improving. But I'm sort of in the camp of like, well, we just laid off a ton of people over the last few years. So I would expect a bounce up in average tenure across all roles just because we've minimized teams down to the better players, right? What do you think's going on there? I mean, if you want to talk more recent or more long term, I mean, just the 18-month average tenure has long sort of just not felt right. But is that just a symptom of like volatile startups and there's sort of nothing we can do about it? Or do you sort of fall in the camp of like, hey, sales leaders are maybe getting blamed for some stuff that's not always their fault, or wherever you want to go on that? Any thoughts?
I have three thoughts. The first is I think that for sure, salespeople and marketing people, lots of people are getting blamed for trying to sell an ugly baby because the founder won't admit that the baby's ugly. That's for sure. That is true. Meaning like the product isn't good. And so the CEO is constantly churning through revenue leaders because they think that the issue is the go-to-market motion, not the fact that the product sucks.
Yeah.
Second thing I think is, speaking for myself, I don't like the 18-month average tenure at the same time that's also my attention span as a CRO.
It's well said. Yeah.
I give the company, when I was a CRO, you got all my good stuff in the first 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
And after that, it's a rare person that, can take something that's 4 million bucks, get it to 10 million, which is a lot of just heavy lifting on process and probably one motion. And be really diligent and then get that thing to 25, 30 million, where you're expanding into a few different motions and maybe selling different products, and then get it from 30 to 100. It's very rare.
Yeah.
And because the level of experience that you need at each different milestone is significant. So I think that's just a reality, and I used to think that it's all BS, that, stage appropriate leadership is BS. But I will say that, somebody that's done the thing before is just more likely to, figure out where not to make mistakes and what mistakes to avoid and how to think about it. So that's the second thing. which is that maybe that's the right amount of time. I certainly don't see it improving, just to be clear. I think
Yeah.
that there's so many companies, there's going to be all of this, it's the markets, like it's the invisible hand, it's the churn of capitalism, that there's new companies forming and old companies dying. And the last thing I think is that, there's a lot of really mediocre sales leaders, just to be clear. Like, and I'm still an advocate for the operating executive. That's what the point of Revenue Collective and Pavilion is and was, and it still is. Because I think in general, operating executives, the people that report to the CEO, get a not a great deal relative to the deal that the CEO gets. And I do think that being a CRO or CMO is way, way harder than being the CEO. And that, yes, CEOs get fired all the time, and capitalism is tough, and private equity buys a company and gives you 3 years, and then you're out on your tush. But I still think that reporting to the CEO is super, super hard. At the same, and there's just very few great revenue leaders. There's just not that many of them. And that's partially what Pavilion is designed to do. That's why we exist, is to give people at least a better fighting chance at making the right contribution.
Well, it's been, I mean, nothing but helpful to me. You guys have, helped me prepare for some prior roles, helped me formulate some, agreements that have been, I mean, they made me money in the end, right? They protected me. And yeah. And the one thing that, because a lot of the way your thoughts on this have evolved is very similar to how mine have evolved. I think, it's almost like we went through stages of like being really pissed off and jaded, and then kind of maybe accepting a bit of reality. And then sort of there's a little bit of both in the end where it balances out. But, one thing I'm often more recommending to people is maybe if you feel like your VP is not ready for the next stage, or they're just they were great to get you from that 4 million to that 10 or to 15, maybe top them, maybe bring someone in who can actually mentor them. I know we're talking about adding a lot of cost and stuff, but I tend to think that if you're going to bring in another person to grow to, I don't know, 50 million, 100 million, whatever, you're going to need more leadership at a certain point anyway. And so maybe don't lose that person. And so my encouragement to the VPs out there is at least be open to that if the option could be presented to you. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I think a couple things. The first is exactly your point. It just depends what's your commitment. There's a commitment to title and status. And by the way, I am somebody that says you should take some jobs for the title. You should take some jobs for the money. Yeah. So I'm not indifferent to those ideas. But I think if you like your job, and if you can have some honest self-reflection, see, if you're a victim and it's unfair and they were jerks and they're mean, fair enough. But if you can actually look at your performance and look at the feedback that you're getting and say, you know what, maybe that is an area that I'm not very good at. And maybe that is something that, I need to learn from somebody else to develop. I think that's a much more mature perspective. And I think it probably creates better wealth creation opportunity or probability. Like what has a better chance of making you some kind of outcome? Is it continuing to switch companies, or is it sticking with the company working to build it and helping support a new leader that maybe you can learn something from? And then the second thing is, I have a CEO friend that was coaching me one time, and he said, you keep trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, talking about one of the executives. And the point is, yes, there's a traditional, these are the activities that go into sales. These are the activities that go into customer success. These are the activities that go into marketing. And the person running each department should do all of those things. But sometimes I think there's more flexibility that's possible, where you say, let me figure out what this person is good at. And let me line up the job description. And I know that that's not convention, and it's not always going to be the case. But this person is a bright, shining star in this area, and they really suck in this area. So I'm going to take this other thing and give it to somebody else, and I'm going to double down on the thing that they're good at. And I think that that doesn't happen that often. Yeah. And I think it should.
Yeah, and you say it's not conventional, but what goes through my mind is like outside of SaaS, that sounds like exactly how you build a team, right? You look at their strengths and you don't design a role and try to find someone who's just cookie cutter for it. Like you sort of start there, but if you're opening a restaurant or you're opening a small business or whatever, like you're figuring out what people are good at and you're sort of aligning them to that over time. And that's what creates sort of what's so unique about a business, right? Is the people. But yeah, we try to do everything very cookie cutter. But the other point, that you made there is like, maybe you can learn something from someone who's coming in and topping you. And you mentioned earlier, like reporting to the CEO is it's not the best experience, right? Unless they were
It's
a
not.
sales leader, unless they did the job, they happen to be a salesperson and they can teach you all sorts of stuff. Like we had that at Single Platform, which was wildly unusual. But usually you're reporting to a technical person who doesn't know so much about it. It's kind of a nightmare. You're always trying to explain it to them. They don't totally get it. So, the way I thought about that at Aircall, because I was presented with the option of like, hey, well, maybe we bring someone in as a CRO, a global CRO, and you could report to them. And at first, it was like, it felt like a smack in the face. But a day later, I was like, you know what? Like, I think that would be cool. Could I help you pick out the person? And that was the plan. We were working on that up until basically COVID happened. We had just sort of started working on that. And then everything got thrown up into the air with COVID. All the plans got changed. But, I did not have experience running a global org, right? Working with across different languages and all this stuff. So to see someone come in who's done that and I could watch them and learn it. And now, when I eventually leave Aircall, I can say, I know how to do this now, right? Because I learned it from so-and-so. Like, that would have been great, right? I would have loved that. And so I think, short of COVID happening, like I might have had that chance, but I would encourage people to be very open to that. And for the CEOs to think, because I know what they're thinking is like, well, I don't want to pay a CRO and a VP of sales. But I think what they need to realize is like, if their VP of sales doesn't suck and you're just replacing them because they, don't have that sort of next level, in order for the next person to focus on the next level, you kind of need someone who's still doing all the stuff down here. And so I tend to think having both is probably a good idea. And yeah, there's pluses and minuses that come with it. But
Just to articulate one of the things that you said, or something that's been on my mind, right? And this is a post that I'll write today or tomorrow for LinkedIn. But I think I have two big rules for business, and one of them is judgment is required, and the second is exceptions will be made. And I just think sometimes, to your point about cookie cutters, we have these like very rigid ideas about how things are supposed to work. And I think we have to be much more flexible about designing the organization. And on the one hand, you want to give people an opportunity. But on the other hand, sometimes what happens is, and I've experienced this a little bit, you become captive to, the flip side of the average tenure conversation is if you have the same team in place, that's really cool. And sometimes you can do great things. But on the other hand, sometimes you become captive to the collective expectations of the team. And sometimes the team just doesn't believe in what's possible. And sometimes you just haven't had a fresh voice in the executive team for a while that points out something that was obvious but nobody articulated. And I just think that there's this balance where it's not always a bad thing to bring in fresh perspectives. We want to learn and we want fresh perspectives.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm with you. Do you think it's similar explanations behind low, sales quota attainment? Do you think it's similar causes of what's happening there? I mean,
yeah, I just
low
think
40%.
I think sales is hard. I think a lot of people that aren't very good at it are in it because it's a job that doesn't require the same level of degree or certification, at least yet, until Pavilion becomes even more of a global phenomenon. And I think that, again, getting people's attention is really hard, and a lot of people are selling really crappy products. So, like I said, it's like sales attainment's broken, outbound's broken, sales is broken. It's like, it's not broken, it's just hard.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean something's broken. It just means, I can't fly, nothing's broken. That's just how gravity works.
Yeah. I tend to think it ties into all the stuff we talked about in the beginning. Like if there's just so many products out there, half baked, they don't really have product market fit. And then I think there's a bunch of products who maybe get product market fit and they think they're just going to keep it forever. And then they just start scaling, but they don't really evolve the product and they lose it. Right. And then you've got this huge bloated sales team that all of a sudden is getting crushed by the newer, better competitor. And so I think there's a lot of that out there as well. Yeah.
I think product market fit, people emphasize the word product and they overlook the word market. And it is the relationship of the product to the market, which includes price, which includes packaging, which includes product development. You can have a great product that does everything right, and then a low-cost competitor comes in, and you might be out of product market fit, exactly to your point. It is not a static state. It is a dynamic state. On the one hand, that's depressing because you can have it and lose it. On the other hand, you can regain it if you execute well. It's possible.
That is so well said. And that is probably what you see most often, right? With the best products is they come in like a Gong or something, and then you've got like Avomas and different things. And now there's people undercutting Avoma that are even more simpler and more cheap, right? And so it just becomes this sort of race to the bottom as things get, I think, commoditized. And then what tends to happen is they want to now turn it into a platform, right, to sort of justify the higher. And I don't mean just Gong. I mean this is a trend that happens. And so I think it's sort of do you think it's sort of a decision? Like, do you have to decide when you've got something that's working really well and it's scaling? Do you sort of need to decide, okay, are we going to now figure out how to make this thing super affordable so no one can beat us on price? Or we have to figure out how to turn this thing into an enterprise platform that people are going to pay a boatload for? Do you think that they kind of have to make that choice at a certain point?
I think it's very rare for people to choose to lower the price and become more affordable.
Yeah.
I think all pricing experts, all private equity, everybody will say, raise the price, build something great and raise the price. And I think that's exactly why, rest in peace, Clayton Christensen talked about the innovator's dilemma, because every incentive is to raise the price. The problem when you build Gong's executed very well, by the way, and they're over 300 million in ARR, and they've out executed outreach and I would say sales loft probably. And but the point is, from once you've built a great business, all other businesses oftentimes look worse. All new product lines don't look as good. Nothing looks as good as the thing that you had that had great product market fit with amazing margins. And so it's not impossible. Mark Roberge, he was on Top Line, the podcast that I do, and he talked about, if you go back, I think this is a talk track that he shares, but it's good. If you go back to 1999 and you go to Cisco, I forget the companies that he was talking, Symantec maybe, but like there's a couple big CRM companies that were all on-prem. And you're like, you told them about Salesforce. You're like, this will absolutely happen. All of this capital, and you're going to need to fire your entire sales team and rehire for the cloud. You're going to need to redeploy capital in this way. You're going to have to go to your shareholders and say, we're lowering prices and lowering I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen. This is not, this is prophecy. This is true. It's still true that they probably wouldn't do it, even if they 100% knew that the cloud was coming. And it's because incentives are so powerful.
Well said. Well said. Let's jump into AI. This one maybe the hottest topic that everyone is. I don't know that anyone knows what we're even talking about yet.
Nobody
I partnered with AI SDR to try to get as close to this as I can to figure out what's going on there. But what do you think's happening? I mean, let's talk. I guess mainly on the sort of the pipe gen, the AI outbound SDR type of world. Do you see a world where, SDRs are just gone and their history, or do you see this is becoming sort of a supplementary tool? What do you think's happening there?
I wish I had a better answer. This is like the question where I have the least good answer. I think AI will be more responsive, will not take any vacations, and will provide better answers, particularly around product marketing questions, than salespeople in many cases. I think if you ask me, do I prefer to talk to an AI or a human? I don't know what your answer is, Colin. My answer is, it depends.
Yep,
it depends,
does. Yeah.
It depends on the use case. It depends on the moment. It depends what's the quality of the AI. AI still gives crappy answers. AI still is wrong all the time. But I also don't really feel like talking to an SDR that's never worked in an office, that's dialing in from their bedroom, that sounds like they just woke up, that maybe just took a bong hit or something like that. So I don't want that either. So again, this is why GTM efficiency is moving in the wrong direction. I think the places, where do we see AI really working? I really see it working around data enrichment. Clay's kicking ass and doing really interesting things. I see it as tools that empower really productive humans. I think, and I don't know if that means fewer or more. I think there's going to be more salespeople. I really do believe that. people say that you don't want to talk to a salesperson. I want to talk to a salesperson. I don't know about you. Every time I call a customer service thing, I'm pressing zero to get to the operator as soon as I can.
Yeah.
Now, for Citibank, and I think every podcast should reserve 5 minutes to speak poorly of Citibank, which is a really terrible institution. I don't want to talk to their customer service because they got 52 departments and they're all offshore and none of them speak English. But I do want to talk to customer service from American Express. So where does that leave us? The answer is still being written. I believe in data enrichment. I believe in hyper-personalization. I believe we can write pretty targeted emails on an individual basis, person-based marketing instead of account-based marketing. And I think an AI will enable that. I don't think it's going to completely replace SDRs. I think we're all looking for investable channels for growth. And if SDRs can give us some pipeline, great. And if AI can give us some pipeline, great. I know Alina just said that her SDRs are kicking butt at Chili Piper. So I think there's a role for thoughtful, creative human beings. I'm never, ever going to say and that'll be true forever. I'm not one of those people that has some philosophical point of view. There's no dogma here. AI will never replace this part of human. I don't know that. Maybe it will. But for now, there's definitely a role for good quality humans.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's like you said, it depends, right? Like I go to my doctors and I ask them questions, but what I find myself doing now is coming home and consulting ChatGPT to see if they agree, right? And try to, you sort of have this backup that you can check with, but you have to.
But you wouldn't not go to the doctor. And
right.
And again, even then, so I uploaded a contract to ChatGPT and it read it and I was like, oh, this is so good, this is so great. And I took a stance with somebody else and I was I was like, this is how it's going to be, and because I thought that I'd had legal advice from ChatGPT, and it misread one of the clauses in the contract.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it says that, if the assets are transferred, it says these things. I'm like, ChatGPT, it doesn't say that. That's not what it says. And they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. My bad.
That's the worst. It's so passively just like, oh, yeah, sorry. It's like, dude, I could have just died right now or something like.
Yeah.
And what I've learned with ChatGPT is the one thing that it's got always is confidence, right? It will always sound like the most confident thing ever. But
also is so supportive. It's like that. Here's, I was rehabbing a hamstring injury and I was like, so today I did this. They're like, here's why that's a great idea. I'm like, you think anything I do is a great idea?
Yeah, it really does make me feel good sometimes. I'll just share my thoughts with it and it's like, that's brilliant. And I'm like, thank you. It makes me feel good.
That's why I like it when it disagrees, because we have a baby and the baby my daughter was two weeks old. And I was like, you got to be able to just let her cry, right? So I'm like asking ChatGPT, I'm like, is it okay if I just let the baby cry? And they're like, absolutely not, Sam. You need to go pick up the baby. They need to be tended to until they're 4 months old. I'm like, finally, a line in the sand that ChatGPT won't cross.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like I've seen people say that this is like a hot debate, right? In parenting, do you let them just suck it up and tough out the crying, or you go comfort them and whatnot? But yeah, I'm with you. Probably comfort the baby. Crying seems like it's something no one wants to do. But okay, let's cover Pavilion. I mean, I was involved when it was Revenue Collective, and I think I was still involved through the early phases of Pavilion. I've been in the dark right now, so catch me up. What's going on? It's grown into this huge organization. What's the elevator pitch today, and who should join?
I think the elevator pitch is it is the premier go-to-market community for operating executives that are interested in leadership roles in go-to-market. And
good. So I'm still referring the right people to you, at least.
Absolutely.
When people come to me and they're looking for jobs or they have questions or they want to learn, I send them to you every time.
100%. That's the goal. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to build, to the point of your questions about AI and all of that, we're trying to build the modern elite go-to-market operating executive. That's what we're trying to do. And we do that through education. We do that through community. We do that through amazing events and in-person experiences. We do that through career assistance and coaching and mentoring. But that is the goal. The goal is that exactly to everything we've been saying, Collin, right? The percentage of people that are actually good at their job is very small. And we are trying to increase that percentage. And we're trying to say, Is there a group of people, we can't help everybody, but is there a group of people that they just don't have the right, if they just need a little nudge? There's a group of A players that are completely self-motivating, completely self-starters, and those people still need information. What makes them A players is their ability to learn. Is there a different group of people that if I just gave them the resources, just a few more on-ramps into networking, professional development, education, they could soar? And that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Do you still have On the Bench?
We still do. That is our career services program for people between roles. We have our legal hotline to help people negotiate in case something bad happens.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, and then the big thing that we're doing right now is we're launching Pavilion Gold. Pavilion Gold is our most elite membership tier. It's for people in seat operating executives from companies on the low end at 50 million in ARR all the way up to a couple billion. So really for the traditional private equity middle market CROs and CMOs, we've got Keith Pierce, the CMO of Gainsight, and Ashley Greck, the CRO of Zero, and Nick Warswick, the CRO of Upside, and Kyle Lacey, now the CMO of Docebo, Kyle Norton at owner.com.
I got Kyle coming on next episode, by the way.
Yeah, that's great. So it's invitation only. It's sort of back to the old days of you have to be nominated, you have to go through an interview process, you have to be selected, and but it's going to be it's an elite group. We're really excited about it.
It seems like what you're doing is very effectively going down the checklist of like every time in these roles or in between these roles where we feel isolated and we need someone to talk to or a group that really knows how to deal with this thing. And there's so much, I mean, people message me all the time with those questions and I just immediately send them a Pavilion On the Bench, go to On the Bench. I didn't know you added the hotline, the goal. I mean, this sounds great. Like, do you, I don't know if this fits into Pavilion, but I'm curious to ask, because you mentioned, Harvard earlier with the CRO school. Do you think there's a future, a world where, and maybe this is something you offer, where people can come straight out of high school, get the education they need to get into B2B sales and just bypass college?
Maybe. We're really focused on leadership right now. So,
Okay, so that's
thing
out of the box.
we're focused on, if you're an independent, IC, you're an independent contributor, you're an account executive, should you join Pavilion? You should join our associate program only if you want to become a leader. And we're going to teach you the skills and the tools that you need to become a manager and a director and a VP. Our goal is to get you to the VP title. And then, but that's what we're focused on. We're focused on people that are building and running teams. There's lots of places you can learn how to run a discovery call, how to disqualify a bad prospect. This is about how to build teams, how to lead organizations, and how to drive growth.
Love it. Well, last thing, let's talk about your book real quick before we jump off. You want to tell us what it's about and where to get it?
The book is called Kind Folks Finish First. It came out a couple years ago, and it's
Great
really
title.
about the subtitle that I don't always mention is Kind Folks Finish First in a Zero Interest Rate Environment, because it's a sort of the story of how Pavilion became really successful over the course of 2020, 2021, but it's also about the values that I think underpin what we're trying to build, which are based on give before you get, build relationships, not transactions, take a big, long view versus a short, small view. It's really about, a belief in karma and a belief that when we all work together, things are better. So it's available wherever books are sold. You can find it on Amazon. It was briefly a Wall Street Journal bestseller. It's got some good stuff in there. It's pretty tactical, and I hope you like it.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to grab a copy. I'm feeling guilty that I haven't already.
And there's an Audible book of it, so with a professional actor that read it. So it's that can be fun for folks that don't like reading.
Awesome. I'm actually more of an Audible guy, but awesome. Good stuff, Sam. I've got links below for joining Pavilion. I've got your X, and obviously follow Sam on LinkedIn if you're not already. Anything else you want to plug in there?
No, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me, sam@joinpavilion.com, and always great to see you.
Likewise. Well, thank you so much. If I can do anything to help you, never hesitate to reach out. It's great to see you.
Great to see you too. Thanks.
Talk soon.